Good afternoon. This is Michelle Savage with XBRL US. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Better Analysis with Better Data, XBRL Investor Tools. This is our first webinar for the season, so we're glad that you joined us, and we have a couple of others coming up later this month that we'll be telling you about towards the end of the program. We're very happy to have with us today a couple of speakers from startup organizations that have embraced the XBRL movement. Our first speaker is going to be Christine Tan. Christine is co-founder and chief research officer of Addin. Chris is also professor of accounting. And before joining Addin, she was XBRL project manager at the Financial Accounting Standards Board. At the FASB, she led the team that was responsible for updating the US GAAP financial reporting taxonomy, covering things such as new accounting pronouncements, common reporting practices, and of course for ongoing taxonomy architecture changes. Christine was also part of the core team at the SEC that designed and built the first XBRL US GAAP taxonomy. Her research in financial reporting has been published in a number of leading accounting journals, and she's also a member of the FASB's Taxonomy Advisory Group and their Dimensions Working Group. So Christine, thanks very much for joining us. Our second speaker and demonstrator will be Joey French. Joey is the president and director of product at Intrinio. Joey is a CPA, and he works with Intrinio, which is a marketplace for financial data feeds and applications. Joey has experience in equity and debt valuation, securities analysis, mergers and acquisitions, due diligence, and corporate finance, and he has spent time working on these areas of practice at firms such as McGladrey, the State of Wisconsin Investment Board, Swiss Re, and Precision Castparts. He's earned both a Master of Accountancy degree, and he is also an advanced back-end web developer. So thanks very much, both of you, for joining us today. For the presentation today, if you have any kind of technical issues, please email us at support@xbrl.us, and we'll do our best to get you back up and running and listening and viewing the program. As we go through the program, we will be taking questions, and you can use the Q&A link at the top of your console to type in your question, and then we'll take them as they come up, and also through a Q&A at the end. So let me just give you a sense for the program today. First, Christine from Addin is going to give us a demonstration of their offering, and then we're going to take a couple of CPE questions for those of you who are getting CPE credit for this program. For those of you who are, we will be, make sure that you respond to the questions as they are asked, and we'll be sure to get the certificate out to you, within a couple of weeks after the program ends. Next, we'll be going through a demonstration from Joey at Intrinio, and then we'll follow up with a discussion between the panelists. Finally, we'll cover our final set of CPE questions. So with that, I'd like to get started and just give you a little bit of background and talk about what we're going to be covering. I think everybody's aware that in 2008, the SEC, of course, mandated the submission of public company financials in XBRL. And in 2009, public companies began complying with this mandate. So today, there is a substantial amount of historical data that's available, and around 10,000 public companies submit XBRL formatted data to the SEC every quarter. The SEC then makes this data available to the public through an RSS feed and also through compiled data sets that can be downloaded all for free. So one of the big commercial data providers recently noted that they were able to reduce their processing time because of XBRL. An XBRL file takes them about 1 to 2 minutes to process compared to an HTML file, which takes about 20 minutes to process. And they also noted that a good quality PDF file takes about 30 minutes to process. So because of the relative ease of working with XBRL data, we've begun to see more and more startup organizations like Addin and like Intrinio that are powered by XBRL data. They're taking advantage of the greater speed, timeliness, and the free availability of this data. So with more competition in the marketplace, it means better offerings for investors, and it could also mean lower prices for investors. So today we're going to take a look at some of the new tools that are changing the ways that investors and that others are using data for analysis. So first, I'm going to turn this over to Christine, who is going to give us a little bit of a demonstration on Idacity. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Christine, I'm going to turn over to you.
Okay, thanks, Michelle, and thank you everyone for attending today. As Michelle said, my name is Christine Tan, and I'm the co-founder and chief research officer of Idacity. I have always been passionate about data, and Michelle mentioned I was at the FASB, and what I did after leaving the FASB was I wanted to figure out a way to leverage my experience in taxonomy modeling and XBRL tagging to help people consume this rich data set. So Emily Huang and I joined forces to form Idacity. Emily, as some of you might know, previously co-founded a company called Rivet Software. Rivet developed a software that filers were using to tag their financial statements. So when we formed Idacity, we really had this passion to bring XBRL data to different constituent groups. We really believe that XBRL data can be useful to the SEC, to investors, to filers, and to filing agencies. And what we wanted to do was to build a platform that would allow each of these groups of people to analyze the XBRL data quickly, easily, and come up with new insights. But we didn't want to just stop there. We wanted to leverage the XBRL technology to go beyond just the 10Ks and the 10Qs and apply XBRL to other areas of SEC reporting, like the MD&A, the earnings releases, SEC comment letters, proxy statements, and so forth, so that the information that's contained in the MD&A and the earnings releases can now be quickly accessible by the SEC and the investors and companies alike, and can be consumed easily. We at Idacity also believe that XBRL data cannot be consumed in a vacuum. We really think that XBRL data, when complemented with other data sources, can give the consumer the ability to generate some very interesting insights, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate some of that today. So what you see on the screen is the Idacity platform, and what you see here is essentially what we call a storyboard. So a storyboard, the way that we think about storyboard is it's like a PowerPoint but on steroids. And as I walk through this storyboard, hopefully you'll be able to see how the XBRL data can come alive. I'm going to slide to the next card. So as I said before, we think that when you overlay other types of information with XBRL data, you can come up with some really cool insights. So we have gone ahead and loaded in SEC comment letters, earnings releases, the MD&A, and other types of non-10K, 10Q information into our platform. So what you see here is a card that shows you that this company, Dolby Laboratories, received an SEC comment letter. And from the SEC comment letter here, you can see that the SEC is questioning or seeking further clarification on Dolby's foreign earnings in lower tax rate jurisdictions, and how this might have impacted the effective tax rate in 2015. So this is some textual information, but in of itself it's interesting. Well, this company got an SEC comment letter regarding their effective tax rate, but let's take a look at the actual effective tax rate and look at the information. So in the next cloud, when I slide across, what you see here is the XBRL data. And in essence, there's a lot going on here, but you can see that you've got the tax rate, which is in the black bar. You've got the impact of the foreign tax rate differential, which is the blue bar. And then you also have the income from domestic operations in the green line, and the income from foreign operations in the orange line. So the beauty about XBRL data is that you can interact with it. It becomes alive, so that you can ask questions on the fly. So as I said before, there's a lot going on in this graph, but let's switch off a couple of things. So let's take out tax rate, and let's just focus on the income from domestic operations. You can see very clearly there's an inflection point in 2014. The income from domestic operations dropped significantly between 2014 and 2015. At the same time, the income from foreign operations increased significantly from 2014 to 2015. Well, let's take a look at the impact of the foreign tax rate differential. And you can see here, between 2014 and 2015, the impact of the foreign tax rate differential increased significantly. But the overall effective tax rate remained pretty much the same. So to amplify this, you can see very clearly here that the overall effective tax rate is pretty stable, but there's a significant increase in the foreign tax rate differential impact. So, well, what does this tell us? Well, from a consumer's point of view, depending on who you are, as I mentioned before, if you're the SEC, this helps you do better enforcement. You're able to see anomalies like this a lot more quickly, like how I've been interacting with it. The SEC analysts can easily interact with this data in the way that I have been. So it helps them with enforcement, helps them, to generate those SEC comment letters that we all love to see, right? And helps them do their job. Well, from an investor perspective, well, this could be something interesting. You might be using this information to trade, right? So when companies receive SEC comment letters, sometimes they're not so good. It's not a good signal. So you might be able to use the data to help you kind of anticipate or predict which companies may be getting SEC comment letters based on examples that you've seen in the past. So you might be able to build out models on that. Well, if you're a filer, well, how does this help you? And I think one of the things that we've been thinking about a lot is companies spend a lot of time producing the XBRL documents. So those folks working in SEC reporting, I mean, you do all the tagging, you're down in the nitty-gritty details. But you can actually also consume your own XBRL data. So if you are looking at your own XBRL data and you're seeing similar trends like this, and if you are able to analyze your peers and your competitor companies, and they received an SEC comment letter and your data looks very similar too, well, this helps you better prepare, right? Because you know that one of your peers or one of your competitors received an SEC comment letter that might, have implications for you. So you can, use this also to be a preventative kind of thing to do. So that's one example. Here is another example, right? A company, Metadata, they also received an SEC comment letter in 2016. Again, similarly, the SEC is questioning their effective tax rate. And they're asking, for further clarification on the effective tax rate that's impacted by federal tax credits or tax incentives. And in particular, the SEC is focusing on 2014 and 2015. Okay, well, let's look at the data. So when you look at the data, it's pretty clear that there's something going on here, which might have triggered, the SEC inquiry, right? So you've got the effective tax rate due to the federal tax incentives increasing significantly between 2014 and 2015. And at the same time, you see the overall effective tax rate decreasing during that same time period. And then you kind of see them kind of sort of like converging in 2015. Again, this this kind of trend or anomaly might have triggered the SEC's kind of attention. And if you're a company, if you're a filing company, and you see that one of your peers received this an SEC comment letter on this, and your data looks shows similar patterns, you might want to be aware of that and be prepared, right? So that's another example from a consumption point. Now, we talked about a lot about XBRL data quality, and Michelle mentioned that at the beginning. And so how can filers use XBRL consumption tools to help them improve their own filing, the quality of their filings? So here is an example of where you've got three companies here. They're casino companies. You can see that this is a trend of unremitted foreign earnings. So you can see that there's, for Las Vegas Sands, they have, systematic time series in the unremitted foreign earnings. So let's switch off Las Vegas. And you look at Wynn Resorts, right, in the black. Again, they exhibit a, somewhat of a time series as well in the unremitted foreign earnings. Okay, so let's switch them off. Now, let's take a look at Caesars Entertainment. From the graph, it looks that they only have 2 years worth of unremitted foreign earnings that they've reported, right? So does that mean that in 2013 and previous years, they did not have unremitted foreign earnings? Well, let's take a look at their actual filings, right? So in the next card, you can see here, I've taken a snapshot of their actual disclosure. And you can see on the right here, here is some language in the bolded in yellow that describes how they talk about the unremitted foreign earnings. So 118 million, which coincides with the 118 million here. And on the left-hand side, you can see this is the a snapshot of the XBRL document. So you can see clearly the 118 relates to this US GAAP element of the unremitted foreign earnings. So let's take a look at 2013. How did they tag that in 2013? Well, using the same exact language in 2013, they disclosed they had $110.3 million in unremitted foreign earnings. But let's take a look at how they tagged it in 2013. That's the 110.3, and here's an extension. And when you look at the extension, if you see what they've called it, it's really deferred tax assets, investments in foreign subsidiaries, which is clearly not unremitted foreign earnings. And so what they actually did was, in previous periods, they used this extension that didn't adequately capture unremitted foreign earnings, so that's why it's showing up as 0. And then they realized that there was an error there, and in 2014 they fixed it. And moving forward, they started to use the US GAAP element. So here's, these are some good examples of how filers can use consumption tools to analyze their own data to help them improve their, or to actually highlight problems in the XBRL filing so that they can improve the quality of the data. As I said at the beginning, what we've also done is we wanted to push the boundaries of XBRL to go beyond just the 10Ks and 10Qs. So here is, an example where we've loaded in the MD&A. So here is the Facebook's recent management discussion analysis. And a lot of investors and obviously the SEC are focusing on information in the MD&A and earnings releases, and in particular the non-GAAP stuff. So if I click on this, it'll take us right to the non-GAAP information. And so for social media companies like Facebook, one of their key metrics of growth is active users. So what we've done is we've leveraged XBRL technology so that we are able to basically capture anything in the MD&A that's of use to investors and the SEC. So if I hover over this and click on that, you can see that it brings up, for Facebook, it's got 2016 Q2. This is 1 billion in active users, but that in and of itself is not interesting. What is interesting, obviously, to an investor, right, and to the SEC, is when you look at the time series growth in the active users, and the ability to interact with data that is in the MD&A and earnings release is really, really powerful. So now you can see that the active users growth for Facebook over time on a quarterly basis, as well as on an annual basis. And in essence, basically, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can quote unquote tag, right, in the MD&A and earnings releases and proxy statements and so forth. So now that you've tagged that information, you've collected that information, you don't have to collect it again. You can now start to use that information in conjunction with other types of, and overlay it with other types of information. So here is a graph of Facebook's active users, and overlaid on top of that is EBITDA, which is GAAP-based, and then you've got non-GAAP EBITDA. And so again, you can come up with some pretty interesting insights when you are now able to overlay this information. You can, again, interact with it. You can very easily flip to another company and look at LinkedIn, for instance. Again, it's interesting that the non-GAAP EBITDA always seems to be much better than the actual GAAP-based EBITDA. So, which may be why the SEC is focusing on non-GAAP information. But that's essentially, I think this is the powerful part, right? When you are able to overlay non-GAAP and GAAP information, and you can overlay information that's in the earnings releases or in the SEC comment letters, you can start to come up with some really interesting insights. So the way that we see XBRL data is that we just don't just limit ourselves to the 10K, 10Q. We really believe in bringing other data sets and data information so that people, whether you're an SEC or you're a filer, you're an investor, you can gain some really cool insights here. Now, that was a storyboard that I had prepared. I want to show you quickly, in the remaining minutes that I have left, how you can basically do queries on the fly with XBRL, right? So I'm going to initiate, I'm going to do this. I'm going to initiate a query. So, and I think this really amplifies the power of XBRL and how quickly investors can get information and detailed information breakdown that would normally take you hours. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to look at Merck, right? You type in Merck, and let's say Bristol Myers. I'll just pick a couple of pharma companies because they're always fun to look at. Okay, and I'm just, obviously I can continue, but I'm just going to say I want to look at revenues. Okay, and then from the drop-down menu, I'm going to select revenues. and then click on refresh data. And then instantaneously it pulls up data just for 2015, package that information in the way that you want to see it. So you want to look at the time series. Here is the annual revenues for Bristol revenues. All you have to do is slide that information across, slide that dial across, and you can see the information update in real time. If you wanted to zoom in on certain quarters, you can zoom in. And then if you want to zoom out, you can zoom out. Okay, so far that's interesting. But you can also use other ways to, other types of data visualizations of that too. What is really interesting is, I think this is where the power of XBRL is. When I click on Explore, you can see this little drill down box here. So I'm going to click on drill down. So what this does, when I click on that and I click on this little icon, is it shows me the breakdown of the revenues that, you would find this information on page, 400, right? Or 300 buried in the footnotes, right? But with a few clicks of a button, you can access that information really quickly. So what you see here is the revenue drill down breakdown by segment or by geography, right? For Bristol and Merck, and this is for 2015. Well, that's okay, that's good. But what about if you want to get a sense of how Merck was doing in Asia Pacific over time? Well, now all you would have to do is just hover over that and you can see the trend in Merck's revenues from the Asia Pacific region. What if you wanted to compare Merck to, say, Bristol, compare the US performance, right? And compare that to Bristol. Again, all you have to do is just move your mouse and you can get your answers immediately. What if you wanted to look at the breakdown of revenues by products and services? Well, we see that for Bristol Myers, they break it down by drug, right? They show their drugs. So again, you can kind of compare how each of the drugs are doing relative to each other, right? Simply by hovering over them and seeing the time series or the trend. It's again, with a few clicks of a button, you can get a lot of really cool insights, right? This is for Merck. And if I hover over a certain drug, you can kind of see, again, the trend, how that particular drug is performing. So that's just, very high level of what you can do, right, with XBRL data. In the last 1 or 2 minutes, I just want to also quickly show you how, as I said, we've loaded in, comment letters and other types of forms. We can also do text search, right? And so how you would do that is quickly click on Notes card to do a text search. I'm going to select from my drop-down menu pharma companies. So we've got a bunch of pharma companies here. So you can see there's quite a few pharma companies here. And I'm going to search for topic 606 that everyone's talking about. It's the revenue recognition, right? I'm going to search on topic 606 for a bunch of these, pharma companies. I'm going to search all text. I'm going to search from 2009 to 2015. 2015 to 2017. I'm going to search everything. I'm going to search all the 10Ks, 10Qs, 20Fs. I'm going to search the MD&A, earnings releases, or even SEC comment letters. But they probably won't get that yet, but in any case, I'm searching everything. So I'm going to click on search. So within a few seconds, what you get is the search results. And that's pretty powerful, right? Because now you can say, okay, for this company, they mentioned topic 606 in their new accounting pronouncements. And then for this company, they also did the same, right? And so forth. But one way to quickly sort of highlight areas that if you're doing research on how other companies may be disclosing upcoming ASUs, you can filter. You can say, well, I wonder who actually mentioned topic 606 in the MD&A. So you can type in MD&A and it will pull up the MD&A. So let's say I'm curious about this particular company that mentioned topic 606 in the MD&A. I'm going to double click on that. It will pull up the MD&A. Then if I scroll down, it will highlight the word topic 606. And you can see here it is, that they mentioned it in the MD&A. Let's say you want to save this for future reference because you like the way that they disclose it. You can select that, and now you can save it. So all of this is savable, right? So I can select that, I can quote unquote like it, and then I can come back to it and refer to it later on. But now I'm traversing all of the MD&As, right, of all the different pharma companies that mention topic 606. So again, here, here's another example. So I'll select that. So I think, Michelle, am I sort of running out of time? Am I at my limit?
Hi, Christine. I'm sorry, did you say you're finished?
Yeah, am I at my limit? Do I have 1 or 2 more minutes or not really? Oh, that's fine.
Well, sure. Take another minute, and
Okay.
and then we'll go on with CPE questions.
Okay, cool, awesome. All right, thanks. So I've shown you a couple of examples. The other thing I wanted to show you was, as I said, we have a philosophy of really pushing the boundaries. So what we did was we actually took the inline XBRL viewer code that the SEC made available, that's open source, and we incorporated that here. And I'm going to show you how we're kind of interpreting that, how we're using that and building on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, for instance, here is the area where you can follow companies. And here you've got, companies that, on my list. I'm going to pick Lana, and I'm going to click on View Company. Okay, so I follow Lana, right? So when I click on Lana, here is the company page. You can see the recent filings, recent earnings releases, and a snapshot of their company performance and related companies. And you can notice here that here you've got filings that says iXBRL. So these are filings that are in inline XBRL. So I didn't want to waste time, so I already had pulled that up. So here is the inline XBRL for Lana Corporation. And you can see that it's very similar to the SEC's, inline viewer, right? But what we've done is, if you notice with the SEC's inline viewer, is like when you hover over or when you click on something, right, on the data point, you'll get a window that pops up. What we've done, and if I slide across, this is what you would normally see, right? You would see this, the metadata associated with that fact. Okay, fine. But what we thought would be useful to investors is that investors don't care about the metadata in the XBRL. They want to analyze this information. So what we did was we piped in the XBRL data, and this is the XBRL data as tagged, so we don't do anything to it. And now the investor can actually do analytics with it, right? So they can switch from quarterly, they can go to annual. Now, from a filer perspective, this is also helpful, right? When you're looking at data from a visual perspective, you can see very clearly, quickly, that if there are anomalies in the data, you are able to, it's very clear. So if you look at, this is for cash and cash equivalents for Lana Home Building, there's only 1 year's worth of data in 2015. But does that mean the company has not been in existence for a long time? Well, let's take a look at the total assets. Well, if you look at the total assets, the company has total assets going all the way back to 2009, right? And a nice time series in their total assets on a quarterly basis. So what has actually happened is that there was some inconsistency in the tagging for Lana, which meant that that's why you don't see a nice time series in the data. So just wanted to quickly point that out, and I'm happy if I have enough time, I can show that to you and sort of trace it back for you, but it was because they had used inconsistent dimensions for the 2015 facts, and also for 2016 as well. So I think I'm running out of time, Michelle. I don't want to take any more time, so I'm going to hand it back over to you. Thanks, Michelle.
Christine, thanks so much. That was great. Why don't we go directly to our poll questions? Because I think we're going to take a CPE question now. And we have had some questions coming in, but we'll hold off on those until we get a little bit further in. So our first poll question, which you should see on the screen here, is XBRL data from US public companies has been available on the SEC EDGAR system since 2009, 2010, or 2011. So for those of you who are looking for CPE credit, please be sure to click on the button of the answer that you think is most logical here, and we'll record your call. Your vote, rather. Okay, so we'll just wait for a couple of minutes here. Okay, so I think we probably are ready to shut down and move to the next poll question. We'll just do 2 questions right now. So we brought up the second poll, which says XBRL formatted SEC data can be accessed from EDGAR as an RSS feed, or both in an RSS feed or as a downloadable data set, or as downloadable CSV files. Click on the one that you think is most appropriate. Okay, and as soon as we've finished with the poll questions, I think we will just switch over immediately to Joey, who is going to show us Idacity. So Joey, if you want to go ahead and share your screen rather than me bringing up slides in between, it doesn't make much sense. We'll just go straight to your screen.
Very good. Intrinio. I'm with Intrinio.
I'm sorry.
So
Joey French from Intrinio.
So I'm with Intrinio. My co-founder, Rachel Carpenter, and I, we started off on this journey a few years ago wanting to build an application. So we wanted to figure out a way to automate some of the jobs, some of the things that I was doing at the accounting firm I was working for, and build software that streamlined a lot of those processes. But what we quickly realized as we started going down this path was data is extremely expensive. And then to actually start building this application, we need to figure out, where to get data, how to source the data, and how to build that into the application. But as we started talking to many of the vendors out there that currently are powering many of the web applications, we quickly realized how expensive financial data is generally. And one day of one class in my Master's of Accounting, we talked about XBRL and how it was going to revolutionize financial reporting data. But it still was not necessarily a thing that was integrated into many applications that were being built. So we started learning more about XBRL and what we could do with it. But quickly, we also then realized the issues that are inherent in XBRL. And the main thing here is normalization. Christine has shown off some very cool normalization processes that she's done to make it so you can easily look and see many of the data over time and then compare two companies to one another. But it does not come that way necessarily in the raw XBRL data. It requires a lot of work to actually do that process of the normalization to make it really easy to compare two companies to one another. So we set off on this course to figure out how to do that normalization process, and then with that, make this data available in a way that never has been done before, and making financial data available to the masses in a way that anyone can get access and get access to the data that really allows them to analyze investments without having to pay massive data vendors thousands of dollars a month to really be able to do the in-depth analysis that's necessary to make a wise investment decision. So with that, what we've built here is we've built a technology that allows you to get data into many different types of applications. So the first example here that I'm showing you is our Excel add-in. We allow you to really easily and quickly get any type of data from the XBRL filings, as well as many other types of data that we've partnered with various other data providers and vendors to really make the XBRL data not just it's in its own silo in the 10K, 10Q format, but then supplementing it with other things like stock prices and, for example, company forecasts that we get from our partnership with Zacks. When we start merging the power of XBRL with our normalization engine, and then merging that with the other financial data such as real-time stock prices from IEX and historical stock prices from Exchange Data International, we really start providing a really robust product that gives access to financial data that has never been done before. So a very quick example here to show you how our Excel add-in works. We have a basic function called Intrinio data point. And with that, you can put in any identifier, and then we have on our website lists of tags that allow you to get normalized data for every single company. So in this case, the most basic example is ORCL, Oracle, and the tag close price will always deliver the most recent close price on a daily basis for Oracle. And with that, another really interesting thing that we've integrated into our system is something called OpenFiggy. With OpenFiggy, we're allowed to have we're able to have a security master at the core of our architecture, which allows us to really have a unified security master across all securities throughout the world. So currently we have coverage of about 130,000 securities throughout the world in all the in various different types of data. On the XBRL data side, we're currently very focused on the US side, but we are looking to expand internationally with our Excel standardization engine. So you'll see here the close price is something we have for over 130,000 securities now internationally. We also, again, we're merging other data sets with the XBRL data. So I'll show you a little bit more of the XBRL data in a second here, but you can see other things such as the historical stock price data. We can look at it on a daily, quarterly, monthly, weekly basis, and then being able to see adjustments for dividends and stock splits, for example. So you have really good comparable stock price data. And this, again, this data is available internationally as well as for the US companies. We also, this is our standardized XBRL data, our normalized data. So one of the examples Christine actually just showed was one of the main problems we identified with XBRL is companies tend to change how they report things over time, and it makes it difficult to compare not just two companies that might have different filing formats or different tags that they tag certain line items, but even a single company over time might change how they report certain line items. And therefore, you can't necessarily fully rely on the XBRL if you want to get a true comparison over time of these companies. So Oracle, I really like Oracle as an example because if you were to look at their actual as reported financial statements, you'd see multiple revenue line items. So Oracle reports here 14 different revenue line items. And if you were to look deeper, many of these are extensions as well, meaning Oracle has largely made up the XBRL tag to tag some of these line items because many of these are not actually in the taxonomy itself. But if you want to compare revenues over time or compare revenues of one company to another, that data is not necessarily normalized across all companies in the system. And therefore, there needs to be some sort of normalization process that takes place to make sure that this data is comparable across companies. So with that, what we've done is we've built our own standardized financial statement template, and it's largely based off of many of the other legacy data providers. But we were definitely influenced by the US GAAP taxonomy and how they shape and how they think about the presentation of financial statements. So we have two different formats. We have an industrials or a commercial tag set, as well as a financial tag set, which includes a lot of flexibility for other companies such as everything from a JP Morgan down to an AIG. So being able to really compare the different operations of many financial companies to one another. But what we also allow you to do is look at different time periods. So for example, we're looking at fiscal year. You can really quickly and easily see the trailing 12 months for the company, and you can see how quickly it updates with all the data to get the sequence data back in time. So currently we are hyper-focused on the three financial statements, the income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flows. But with those three financial statements, we've calculated hundreds of metrics and ratios over time. And this really gives you a lot of flexibility to build really in-depth analyses with all the data. And just another thing to keep in mind, these functions are extremely flexible. Similar to what I showed you on Intrinio Data Point, we have ways to query exactly what specific filing or what time period you're looking for a certain data point. So in this case, I'm looking for the most recent fiscal year NOPAT, and I want to round it to millions, and that's for Oracle here. So this is really cool. You can easily and quickly get access to a lot of data for a single company. But where this really starts to become powerful is when we start looking at comps, for example. So here's a quick template that we built that allows us to compare Oracle to some of its peers. So here we're looking at some profitability and revenue metrics. Really, we can build dynamic views of all the data. So as soon as a company files their new 10K or 10Q, this data will update instantaneously. There's a slight delay in the processing, but within about 10 to 15 minutes, our system starts to populate the new filing data from the 10K or 10Q. There's other types of metrics then that you can really start getting a lot of insight into these companies. So looking at ROE and ROIC disaggregation, net working capital, debt comparison comps. We really have done many of these ratios that with XBRL and raw format are difficult to calculate because there are many weird inconsistencies with the raw XBRL tags that make it difficult to compare using these ratios reliably. So really this shows off a lot of our coverage for the public company data. We've also started to look at many of the bank data as well. So many of you are probably familiar that the FDIC has also required banks to file their call report, UBPR reports in XBRL. And with, again, our security master that we have at the backbone of our whole service, we're able to map the banks to the actual publicly traded companies. So if I go back to the main page here, all I'm inputting here is a ticker symbol, in this case JPM, and then several comps, all using their ticker symbols. But this is able then to map it to the bank, or we also do have bank holding company data as well, so to bank holding companies, and get access to their comparable metrics for the FDIC call report and UBPR report data. So here we're looking at some data off of the income statement for the call report and the UBPR report for JP Morgan Chase National Association. You can do all different types of entities, not just exclusively public companies. There are, I believe, 30,000 total banks in our coverage, including the bank holding companies. So we have very extensive coverage on these as well. So other, we do the whole UBPR report and call report, so we have a whole breadth of information here. And again, similar to what we saw on the other template, it's really easy then to build comparable metrics to the different entities here. So here we can look at the income statement metrics for the various banks from the call reports. And this is a very powerful tool that we're really working on now, building out new ways to look at this data. The last thing that I really wanted to show off here is our really what we're trying to build. It's the greater vision beyond just giving an Excel add-in to access all of the financial data. While that's really powerful and helpful for a lot of people, because in general this usually costs $1,000 a month to get access to a tool like that. What we're trying to build here is a greater ecosystem, and really to solve the problem that we first set off to solve was, we want to make it super easy for anyone to build an application that can really start providing the next generation of apps that disrupt many of the larger players that really haven't been innovating in this space for largely over a decade. And again, the main hurdle to that is access to good quality financial data. If you want to build an application, it requires you to pay something called redistribution fees. When you're buying a subscription to one of the other larger data vendors, you're not necessarily paying for the rights to display the data on a web application. You're just buying rights to view the data in Excel or on their web application. But when you're buying it to build an application, you have to pay redistribution fees, and that's where they try to the data vendors try to understand, how many people are looking at the data, how accessible is it, and as soon as you start really putting all those variables together, the cost can become burdensome for any startup that is looking to rival some of these legacy data vendors. So what we've done here is we provide many different data feeds. More importantly, one of them being IEX real-time stock prices. To get access to redistribution of NASDAQ or BATS real-time stock price data, that becomes extremely expensive. We provide it at a cost that makes it accessible to largely any app developer. And then, like I mentioned before, we now cover 30 of the largest stock exchanges in the world with stock price data that we've partnered with Exchange Data International, as well as sales and earnings estimates, as well as price targets and analyst estimates from Zacks. And we have several other large partnerships that are in the works that will be launched here in the next couple months. But with all this data that we have, what we're doing here is powering applications like Zoom Markets. So Zoom Markets is a company that's in our developer program. This is a guy that he used to work at Bloomberg, and he wanted to go off and build his own web application that would make it available to the tools that were available on a Bloomberg terminal, but make it available to anyone. And what you'll see here are many of our data feeds that we offer are integrated into this. So you'll notice like the income statement, for example. The income statement he is getting directly from the normalized income statement that we provide, which again, all that data is being sourced and normalized from the XBRL data. Other things like holding insider and institutional holdings data. This data is available in XML format for every single institutional holder, but what we've done is just built it in a really easy to use manner, and with that, the price that we are servicing this at is at a more appropriate level given the various technologies that enable this data to be distributed in a much cheaper manner than has ever been done before. So what you see here is, this is a web application that has been built with all of this data. And again, much of this data is from the SEC or from XBRL filings. But really what this is making is a whole new ecosystem of applications at a much, much lower price point than the legacy providers that really make it available for anyone. And as soon as the larger banks and institutions start to understand this, they'll realize how easy it is to start slashing their budgets for, in general, one of the most expensive expenses at many of these financial institutions, and that being data. As soon as you can realize that it's cheaper for you to build your own application than it is to necessarily buy access to these legacy data providers, that becomes an interesting proposition, because as soon as you start doing that, you're building out your own knowledge management system internally, as opposed to paying, and that's obviously creating an asset, as opposed to paying a large vendor millions of dollars every year and not necessarily getting anything value add out of that relationship. And like I started off, we wanted to build our own application. And this is, again, something that we just built on the side. We wanted to show off what we can do with all of this data that we've now built into this ecosystem. And what we've built is a valuation engine. So being able to do a quick and dirty DCF for any publicly traded company in basically the world. And with that, really being able to get a full DCF here and having the ability to change your assumptions quickly and easily to really build your own model into an easy to use manner. So for example, I can easily collaborate with other people using this online web application where when you're sharing Excel models or other things such as that, it becomes very difficult with version control and other intricacies that it becomes difficult to share some of these Excel models. So building web applications are the future, and the way to get to that future is to make financial data free and accessible to anyone, to really push the boundaries of what's possible once this data is freely accessible by developers in a way that's never been done before. So with that, I'm available for any questions, and I'd be happy to connect with anyone that's interested in learning more about what we do here at Intrinia.
Joey, thanks so much. That was great and really, really interesting. I think both of your demonstrations highlight how the availability of structured data like this in a computer readable form is really changing the world of data and making data much less expensive, and then making the analytics on top of them really the key value add. So I think that's great. I'd like to go to a couple of questions. So I'm going to share my screen here again. And bear with me a sec. Okay, so I think we'll just run through a few questions that I want to ask. Both of you have been working with data, financial data for many years, both with traditional data and with structured data. What would you say is one of the key differences between XBRL data versus traditional data sets? And this is really for both.
Yeah, for me, I love the metadata. So for example, we do source data from the FDIC and or from the Federal Reserve and the bank holding company data. That data comes in a CSV file that is extremely flat and has no context. The main thing with XBRL and specifically comparing the bank holding company data to the call report bank data is all the metadata that's underlying everything, every single line item. We're barely even scratching the surface with what's truly available and has potential. But it's that metadata that gives you context in a way that most traditional data sets don't allow you to really understand and see.
Okay, great. Can you give us an example, Joey, of how you use that metadata? And maybe describe to the audience what is the metadata that's most of interest to you? Like what pieces of it?
Yeah, so an example on the income statement of a company, for example, we can easily see how the line items of the income statement are calculated. So in XBRL language, that's called the calculation link base. There's something that allows you to see how the various line items relate to one another and really be able to then understand the context of how this whole statement works together. When you're just looking at a PDF, an HTML file, or even a static CSV file, you really don't get that context. And then beyond that, you have the debits and credits. Is what is a line item? Is it a debit or a credit? And it's all those types of metadata underlying everything that really give you a full picture instead of a flat picture.
Great, thanks. Chris, what would you say is one of the key differences for you working with XBRL?
I think with XBRL data, it gives you a lot more information. So for instance, companies are required to tag their footnotes, right, as a text block. Well, what that means is that now you can actually pull up all the income tax footnotes for a given industry and compare it at once in terms of the language that companies are using to describe certain things. So one of the things I wanted to, I pointed out in my presentation is, companies are often looking at each other to see how they are disclosing certain accounting policies because they don't want to stand out right from the crowd. And so with XBRL, you're able to now very quickly be able to pull up companies that you want to look at and then find out how they're disclosing certain things. So I think from a SEC reporting standpoint, I think that's really, really helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me go on to the next question here. And this centers around data quality, which obviously is of paramount importance when looking at this kind of information. And I want to mention that XBRL US initiated a program in 2015, and the goal of that program was to help filers improve the quality of their filings. There were a lot of people talking about data quality, a lot of concerns that there were inconsistencies in the data that was being reported. And the program involves a committee, which is called the Data Quality Committee, that works together to establish rules that issuers can follow to help make more consistent, usable data. In your work with the XBRL data, have you noted any of these kinds of issues, any kind of inconsistency problems that you think should be resolved? And what do you think issuers should do to improve the quality of their own data?
When you start looking at the XBRL data, and especially when you look at time series and when you compare companies, anomalies will stand out very, very quickly. And usually when anomalies stand out, there's some issue with the tagging, right? So I think, when you see all your peer companies showing, increasing trends in unremitted foreign earnings or whatever it is, and then your company has a dip in one period. Well, it's likely that that dip in one period for your company, that time series, indicates that you might have missed a couple of zeros on the end of your fact, or you might have used, or you might have, tagged it incorrectly, right? Because it might have dropped to zero. So when you look at the data from a visual perspective, it's very easy for filers to quickly identify when there is a problem with the XBRL filing. So I think filers can definitely, use tools like Intrinio, Audacity, and some other vendors out there to identify anomalies in their own data. And I think filers often tend to focus so much on the tagging and not kind of step back and look at the data and say, okay, well, what does this mean? How does this data look like when they actually do their tagging?
Yeah, for me, it's I view myself as a problem solver. So I looked at the XBRL filings as they came in, and quickly I realized that XBRL in its raw state was very difficult to use with many of the considerations that Christine just mentioned. At this juncture, I believe there still is a necessity for normalization by data vendors, just given the complexity of XBRL filings and 10Ks, 10Qs, and all the various filings themselves. They are very complex documents. I understand that there will be various data quality issues, and those are improving over time, don't get me wrong, but that normalization process is still going to be a thing for the foreseeable future. I'd love to see a day when XBRL in its raw state can be accessible and really easily digestible for comparison, again, across time periods for a single company and across companies themselves. But really, there's still substantial hurdles to get there. And don't get me wrong, we're definitely on the right track. And I applaud the efforts from the AICPA and the Data Quality Committee of XBRL US. And I do foresee a future where it will be in a really good usable state. It's just we're not there yet, and the technology needs to evolve to grow into really solving the problems of what all the users intend to use the XBRL data for.
Great, thank you. I want to take a question that we received from the audience. How difficult is it to adjust to changes in XBRL data types, such as extensible lists or extensible enumerations? I don't know which one of you wants to respond to that one.
Well, I am not qualified to, because I'm sort of more the data person. We've got our tech folks who are currently looking into incorporating type dimensions and new updates to the taxonomy architecture but every time an an introduction is made, obviously, all the software vendors have to go back to the drawing board and try and figure out ways to incorporate that in. But based on the information that my tech folks have given to me, it's not a big deal.
So,
okay, great.
Yeah, we deal with a lot of that with machine learning. I don't know if I'm answering this exactly how the question was answered, but it's using innovative data techniques that really allow us to get that comparison financial data, despite extensions and weird things that companies use in their filings.
Okay, great. I think we need to go to polls because we are at the top of the hour, although we can take do a couple of additional questions after that, but let's cover the polls to make sure that we get those for those of you getting CPE. So the first poll question is XBRL differs from traditional data sets because it, 1, can be accessed through the SEC's Edgar system, 2, is provided in an HTML file, or 3, it makes individual data points computer readable. If you could just click on the button that is most appropriate, and then we'll go to our final poll question for CPE. Okay, we're going to bring up the last poll. The work of the XBRL US Data Quality Committee is to, 1, develop rules for issuers to help them create better quality data, 2, provide education to issuers, or 3, encourage the use of XBRL data. So this is the last poll question. If you could just respond to that, and then we'll take maybe just one more question because we are hitting the top of the hour here. Just one last question for you, Christine and Joey. What other kind of data would you like to see in XBRL format? You both talked a little bit about commingling different types of data with what you were able to get in XBRL, which I know makes it much richer and much more interesting. What other types of information would you like to see in tagged format so that it's easier to extract?
Yeah, so one interesting thing that I just saw that XBRL has US has innovated on is corporate actions data. I saw recently that there's now a standard for how to report corporate actions data via an XBRL format type filing. I think that has a ton of potential because really there's so much information that is lost if you don't actually read some of the various 8Ks and even press releases that just disclose data. It's something that is a huge hole in really a lot of these systems, is really keeping track with all the changes in corporations and other complex events like M&A transactions. Having a set filing format in XBRL is obviously the most relevant and right way to do those types of filings in a digital readable format. But really, it needs to find adoption before that really can take off.
Thanks, Joey. Chris, is there anything else that you'd like to see in XBRL format?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the market's been asking for the SEC to mandate, MD&A tagging, earnings releases, proxy statements, the comp tables, right? And so obviously, as it relates to government, things take time, right? And so what we've done is we've just tried to jump ahead of that curve, and we, as I showed in my demonstration, that we just leveraged that XBRL technology to just go ahead and just tag the earnings release and MD&A and so forth. So that's what we hear a lot from our customers, that people really like all that non-GAAP stuff in the MD&A and earnings release. Right.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I think we will, since we're running out of time, we'll skip the other questions that we had planned, and I'm just going to really briefly give a pitch for some events that we have coming up. January 18th, we have something that's a little bit different, actually. We have partnered with some industry groups in the solar area, along with the Department of Energy, and we are developing data standards for solar financing. So this is a little bit different. It is not compliance related, but it is actually developing standards for solar financing to reduce the costs of solar energy. And so that event is taking place next week. We hope you'll join us for that. And then January 25th, we have a conversation with Howard Kaplan, who's with the SEC's Office of Enforcement, about how they use data and how they use public company data and how it helps them with the process of their work. So we hope that you'll join us for those events. And I would like to thank Joey French from Intrinio and Christine Tan from Idacity for giving us a great introduction to their tools. And I will send out links to their websites in an email, follow-up email, including the replay for this program tomorrow or the next day. And I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you at some of our next events coming up next week. Thanks very much.